Welcome to Define Your Path with DocV, bringing you real talk with global thought leaders to inspire hearts and minds for sustainable breakthroughs and profitability for your life and business. Here's your host, DocV.
Hi, I am Dr. Virginia LeBlanc, also known as DocV, the Pivot Maestro. Welcome to the Define Your Path podcast for thought leaders, change agents, purposed entrepreneurs, and legacy builders. We are all about transforming perspectives, as well as inspiring and motivating you to think without a box to define your path by exposing you to global thought leaders across industries on how they successfully define their path in life and business. Define Your Path is all about truth, transparency, and love to help you navigate the waters of your life and put you back in business. Today's spotlight is with Stephanie McAuliffe. Stephanie is the CEO of Reclaiming Yourself, founder of The Way of the Diamond Warrior, and author of the recently released international bestseller, The Impact of Silence. She is a multidimensional healer and guide and works with female leaders to reclaim their sacred selves, to step into their power, the truth of who they are, and embody the happiness that's their birthright. Stephanie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, DocV. It is an honor and a pleasure to be here with you today.
I am so excited to have you with me today. Congratulations on the release of The Impact of Silence. I cannot wait to read it. And I just wish you tremendous success with it.
Thank you.
So we look forward to hearing your story of how you faced your fears, to love the skin you're in and pivot into pursuing your passion and soul purpose. In our podcast, we love to keep it simple. So here are 2 questions for you. How have you defined your path? And how do you want to help others define theirs? So the stage is all yours, Stephanie. Spotlight is on you.
Thank you. How have I defined my path? For many years, I didn't. I did what I thought I was supposed to do. I followed the rules that I was taught. I spoke up when I was spoken to. I kept quiet. I numbed myself in many, many ways, and I allowed the world to define my path.
Wow.
Even in my 27 years on Wall Street, and I was a senior director managing an $85 million program, and I was miserable because it got to the point where I had lost so much of myself. I was completely defined by my career, by my successes, by my promotions, by the size of the projects that I managed. And an $85 million 4-year global program is not a small responsibility. And yet, when within the course of 1 year, my 10-year marriage and my 27-year career on Wall Street both ended. I sat on my couch and I had nothing to look at but myself. And all of the things that I had ignored for all of those years, including sexual abuse and not speaking up for myself and defining myself by the things that had happened to me, all were right there. And I have what I call a little bit of a mini nervous breakdown. You might want to call it PTSD. Really, it was the suppression of what had come up, of what hadn't come up, was right there, smack dab in front of my face. And this really started a deeper healing journey. Now, I had done work. I had gone to Al-Anon, which is for families of alcoholics. I had been to therapy off and on for years. It wasn't as if I was starting from scratch. What the universe was asking me to do was go deeper and to understand really what was behind some of these things. Because what I understand now is that a lot of allopathic medicine will either teach us mind over matter, or that we can control our mind, or we can deal a little bit with our emotions, but we stop there. And I like to use the sentence of when I stepped into energy healing, it completed the sentence.
Wow. Wow. That is really deep, Stephanie. Thank you for sharing all of that. You're just very personal, your pain, and you're another one of my guests who, all of my guests who have experienced and found their soul purpose by walking through their pain, facing their fears. Let me ask you this. Were you cognizant when you were, living the life, you were on Wall Street, you were running things? Were you cognizant of just the trauma, the PTSD you were living with? Because so many of us are not. We think that's only assigned to, folks in combat or in direct, direct conflict.
No, I wasn't cognizant at all. I was getting up at 4:20 in the morning to be on a 6 a.m. boat, to be in Manhattan by 7, home at 6 or 7 at night, would have a bottle of wine with dinner with my husband, and then go to sleep. And I was on a, whether we want to call it a roller coaster or just the train that just kept on moving. And no, I wasn't cognizant at all. I just knew that I was tired and I wasn't honoring myself. So it wasn't until my divorce and then the end of Wall Street. So the end of my marriage gave me some space. Mm-hmm. So really, work was a perfect foil to ignore the things I didn't want to see.
And I think that is how so many of us walk through life. We walk through life in this rinse and repeat, right? And we're hiding our lack, our lack of joy, unfulfillment, etc., by just immersing ourselves into work, whether we're happy with what we're doing or not, to avoid the truth of our pain, of our hurts and our hangups and our habits.
Yeah. Well, and society doesn't give us room to talk about it, because here I was a senior director for an international insurance firm, making good money, living in a nice house, and I wasn't satisfied. I wasn't happy. And yet, from society's perspective, what did I have to be unhappy about? So there's no room to talk about that. And so we silence ourselves to the silencing from society and from the rules of, well, you have everything. You have more than a lot of other people. So who are you to talk about healing and the things that have happened and that you're not satisfied? And yet I did what I thought I was expected to do, was climb the corporate ladder and keep climbing. And yet I then got to the point of, well, what am I going to do? Manage $100 million program? It was going to be the same thing. And so it was an unwinding process.
And it was an emptiness, it sounds like, also, that you had of feeling.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
So let's talk about just this whole concept of the box, right? I like to talk about it a lot because it really kind of blows my mind, because I think it's a simple thing, right? But, it took me years to learn this as well. So when I say this, when I talk about the box, it's such a revelation to people. So, I talk about how society puts us in a box, right? And education or training of some sort, it gets us out of the box, but we're still outside the box, hovering around it, right? But it's only until life happens, those tragedies, those traumatic situations, those almost knockout punches, right? That where we have to figure out, okay, we're going to stay down here, we're going to get back up, until we literally have that revelation, that aha, and we start to just kind of process our life, and which allows us to get to a point where we can start to think without a box.
And I remember the first coach that I worked with, and it was an 8-week program, all online. That's actually what got me onto Facebook. I was resistant to social media back then.
Me too.
And in the first meeting, she asked the question of, how do you want to feel? And it shook me to my core, because I realized I couldn't answer the question. I could tell you how I felt. I couldn't tell you how I wanted to feel. How did I want to define my day? What choices did I want to make? It didn't even feel safe to dream because it didn't feel safe to dream when I was young. So to open that up and to step outside of that box was, my family started looking at me like, who are you? We don't know you. I had the world wrapped up so tightly, controlling it. I knew what I was going to do when I was going to do it and with whom. And I created such a rigid plan that I didn't allow any space within me to play.
And that's huge. You did not allow space within you to play, because all of just the day-to-day, all of the rigmarole was taking up that.
There was no room whatsoever. And so when I had the room, like I said, I sat on my couch for a few months. And then it was, okay, what do I want to do? And I read self-help books voraciously and just started to explore. And what it ultimately did was brought me back to my healing gifts that I had had all along. And yet I pushed them aside because it actually, in the frame of mind I had been in, wouldn't have been, it could have caused damage to myself and to others had I used them when I was in that old frame of mind. So as I've healed and as I've cleared the old layers and the old stories and the energies and the thoughts and the feelings that went with them, my gifts have expanded beyond anything I ever knew they could. But that's what creating space does for us. And for you, it may not be healing gifts, it may be something else. And yet we all have these inherent abilities within us that, for whatever reason, through trauma or grief or sadness or hurts, the stories that we take on, we create these layers that, as I say, block the beauty that we were born with.
So true. That is so true. And so basically, you went from, Wall Street, leading an international insurance firm, to now doing nothing in those worlds. So how did you trigger your mind to face your fears and literally start thinking without that box? I mean, was it something that just happened overnight? You shared, just your reading and your studies and the personal wellness and development that you started down that path. Can you speak a little bit more? Because people, have a really difficult time deciding if they're going to fight or flee. So what was it for you?
It has been a process. And it's something that I say we can start with. There might be a physical manifestation of something going on within us. And then we can step into the emotional and the mental aspects. And that's where a lot of people stop. And yet, and this is all work that I did for myself, and this is the same work that I do with my clients, is we then step into what's the internalized energy? Because anywhere between 97 and 70% of our diseases and physical afflictions are because of the energy that's internalized within our body.
Oh my goodness. And I'm a witness of that. Yes.
Which is a huge number. And it's easy to go to a doctor and say, give me a pill. It's easy to go get a massage. And I'm not saying don't get a pill and don't go get a massage. And that the reason underlying all of that is something else. And it's usually something that we have buried within. Mm-hmm. And so it has been a process. And yet then, like I said earlier, when I stepped into energy work, it completed the sentence. It let me out of my own jail.
Wow.
And so when we clear that internalized energy, we then have space to call into what it is that we want and to step into our true selves. Because I think of the body as having a finite amount of space. And law of attraction is great. And yet we can't call in what we want until we create space for it. There's only so much that we can put into that box.
So true. So true.
So it has been a process. And I think healing continues for the rest of our life. And as we step into it, it gets easier. So now, when I get triggered by something, because I do, I'm human, I get curious and say, why am I being triggered? What's behind this? Because there's always something for me to learn. And it can even be being stronger with my own boundaries with people.
And that's a huge thing that all of us could stand wonderfully to learn. So this is a perfect segue into our second question.
Mm-hmm.
How do you want to help others define their paths? How do you work with them? How can they work with you? What does it look like?
Most of my clients have come to a place, a roadblock, where they have been pushing and they don't know how to move forward, either in their business, their personal life, and it gets harder and harder to push, just like it did for me. And then they decide, I don't want to push anymore. There's something else here for me. And so I always start off with a conversation with people to find out what's going on with them, because there's different stages of this process. And if you're just starting out, I may not be the right person for you, because there's a lot of great resources that are out there when you're starting on your path. The people that come to me are the people who have almost given up moving forward. I've done all this work. I've been to therapy. I've gone to 12-step. I've done these other things, and I still can't figure out why I can't get ahead. Part of my magic special sauce is I can very quickly connect with the source of what's really going on. And then it's working through that, because we don't have to drag ourselves through the mud as we go through the healing process. And yet awareness is key. Because if I go to a healer who just clears energy, well, that's fine. And yet if I'm not aware of the patterns, I'm apt to repeat them. So it is the awareness. It is the clearing. It is a lot of work on both of our parts, because I'm there on the journey as the guide with my client. And yet I can't do the work for them, per se. There are some people who are very attached to their stories. And if they don't want to let them go, there's nothing that I can do for them. So these are people who are saying, yes, I am ready. I want to step into this. I want to be free of this once and for all, even if it's a little messy moving through it, because the little bit of mess is a whole lot better than all of the energy that we expend in trying to hold it off to the side.
So true. So true. But yet we think we wear these masks as we move through life. You know, I tell you, I had so many masks in the closet, they could be falling out, because I was just keeping so much in, until I started to do the work, and when I started learning about energy and healing, because, a lot of people think, oh, that's, very woo woo, that's not really real. It's intangible to people. But, just going through some recent health issues myself and doing energy work, I tell you, it's the first time that I was able to tap in and feel literally the energy flowing through our bodies. We don't process that, we're not just flesh, bone and blood, right? We are energy. How do you start, or what would you say to people who are curious? They might not be in your clientele yet, but they're curious. And they're needing something to help pull them out of that place, that space that they're in right now, to help them change their circumstances. Because I love the title of your book, The Impact of Silence. We're silent. We don't speak up.
And it's giving what's inside a voice. It can be a letter that will never be sent. I've written a lot of letters. I wrote 6 FU letters the other weekend. And that including one to myself for some of the things that I had put up with and years ago. And yet it's another layer of energy. And then I took them out and I burned them in ceremony because I'm not meant to hold on to them. I like to think of, for people who aren't really familiar with energy, have you ever walked into a room and you felt like you walked into a wall? Because it's the energy that people are expending, that no one is saying anything, but there is the phrase, you could cut the energy with a knife. There have been other times in cartoons, we used to see thought bubbles.
Yes.
Right? People send out thought bubbles. It's energy. Everything is energy. Every single thought is energy.
That's brilliant.
And so if I'm thinking about you and all of a sudden then you think about me and you say, hey, Steph, I was just thinking about you. We're all connected. And so everything that we express, that's why I say it becomes layers within. And so it is beginning to give it a voice, because that's how we create true freedom. That's how we create space for what it is that we want to call into our life. And sometimes it's also past life energy as well. And that's part of what I do with clients. When we're clearing energy, it's not just this life. It's past life. It may be attachments to other people. We have a lot of attachments with our family, and they can be our biggest source of pain and inspiration.
Yeah, so true. So true. That was so good. So, like, what do you say to those people who, you're saying they're giving voice to the inner voice that is literally poisoning the soul with, the negativity or hiding the hurt, the pain, who then say, okay, well, I'll just go. They kind of secretly go take some workshops or what have you. And, they're taking the first step. So, bravo to that. But do you find by letting your voice out, by speaking out and voicing and sharing the hurt and pain, is a part of, or the greater part of, the healing? What are your thoughts there?
It is. And it's also being aware of who we're sharing it with, because it can be like a verbal throwing up. And sometimes that can push people away. And that was a hard lesson for me, because when I was beginning this, I wanted to talk about all the things that had happened to me and all the things you did. And all it did was push people away. So before I wrote my first book, I actually have a file on my old computer. It's probably about 75,000 words. And it was so cathartic, because it was things that I wanted to say. And maybe about 3 or 4 paragraphs of that went into my first book.
Wow.
So there is something very powerful about being able to speak in one form or another. What I find fascinating, and this is connecting with Ukraine. One of my old doctors grew up in Ukraine, and she said they used to sit on park benches, and someone would sit next to you, and it was like they would be a witness to your words.
Wow.
And they would do that on buses as well. And I know there's networks within Canada. There's some of this that's appearing within the US as well. So it's someone who is not attached to us, can be a witness for us. And it allows us to get those words out and say what we need to say. Because sometimes it's the energy of coming up through the throat that clears some of those blocks as well.
Wow. I love that concept. Just of being a witness for someone else, and being able to voice that. And just the thought of energy, just like, when you're sick, and you're trying to heal, the body is trying to heal, and you're trying to get that coal out of your system. It's a process, and it's part of the healing. So I love those thoughts. So would you say now that you feel like, or that you are walking in your soul purpose, SOUL purpose?
Absolutely. I have no doubt in my mind. And yes, I am a healer. I am a guide. I walked my talk. I continue to. It is, and I don't want anyone to ever feel as alone as I did for so many years. I felt like I was on my own island and that I couldn't talk about what was going on. And this is why I've written both of these books. And there are more to come, because really it's by us giving a voice, it allows other people. It's almost like we're waiting for permission. And not that we need a permission slip, but it's really as, Brene Brown has a great quote. She says, when you own your story stops owning you.
Yes.
And it is by us sharing our stories and some of the things that we went through and how we stepped through it, that it gives people an idea of, oh, I can go do this, or this might be someone I want to work with. So that they're not just doing some of the one-off workshops, which can be great and can open things up. And yet I think one of the most important things is to not just tell people what, it's giving them how. Yes. I think it's a disservice to write in a book, well, these are all the things, and sharing stories and leaving the reader in someone else's trauma and not giving them a vehicle to heal their own.
Excellent. Excellent. Stephanie, I tell you, it's just so much here. We're going to have you back, girl. I appreciate everything you've shared, just your insight, your thoughts, your expertise, because, so many of us, we're walking around, we don't understand that life programs us, and we really have to make a conscious decision to break out of that programming, to reprogram our thoughts, our mindsets, and tune into our own channels and do the work it requires, and face the fear of being ostracized or thought of as being, anything but normal, right? So I really appreciate you loving the skin you're in enough to walk your journey, to define your path, to do the work that you're doing, and to help and change the lives, so many lives that you've already started to work with. And I know this book, The Impact of Silence, is going to just transform lives and bring people running to your doorstep. So thank you so much for being our spotlight today.
Thank you.
I want the audience to be sure to follow you on social media. So please tell them how they can connect with you.
The easiest way is via my website, wayofthediamondwarrior.com. From there, you can get to the other social media places. And if someone wants to have a discovery call, explore the possibilities, let's have a conversation. It's complimentary. And from there, I also want to have my blog. I also have a free energy leaks assessment on my website, because we almost all leak our energy in one way or another. And this gives the person who takes 5 questions, 5 life areas, insight into where they may be as well, and to pull their own back. And I just wanted to add one other thing. There is no story that can't be healed.
Yes, yes. And in fitting words to end our podcast on, at the very least, you all need to go to Way of the Diamond Warrior and take that energy assessment. Whether you believe in just the energy healing or thoughts, take that assessment. And I promise you will be surprised at how you will relate and how you will start to see how that applies in your life. And Stephanie, thank you again. You will be able to read Stephanie McAuliffe's full bio and connect with her on the Define Your Path podcast platform as well. And be sure to visit our virtual home to see what we're up to at definingpaths.online. We will see you next week. I am DocV, the Pivot Maestro, and always your corner woman. Be true to you and define your path. See you on our episode next week.
You've been listening to Define Your Path with DocV. To learn how to see with true vision and define your path, visit definingpaths.online/true-vision.